Champions, got something a bit different today from the usual musical instrument devices. Got a HiFi from the late 70s. It's a Yamaha CA-1010. The customer brought this in after it had visited another prominent HiFi service centre in Sydney, and they had it for over a year. I think it was like 18 months, and they charged them $1,000. And when I opened this and had a look, I had to break it to the customer that they basically did nothing for that $1,000. So I guess I don't know, that maybe they're charging for storage fees because they couldn't be asked fixing the amp. So I gave them a quote. It sucks with jobs like this because you feel bad before you've even given them a price, but I'm not the one that did it, so I can't feel too bad. And HiFis, especially ones like this, tend to take a lot of time and a lot of reasonably expensive components, so it is what it is. They went ahead with the quote and they just want to see it working again with a minimum fuss, and that's what I'm going to do. So it was quite funny opening the thing up and seeing what the previous tech had missed. Now, I'm not saying I'm a genius or a hi-fi guru, but it's just plain as day stuff that was visible as soon as you took the cover off, and they couldn't find the problem. So the symptoms were there was no signal on some of the inputs. There was excessive hum in the output, scratchy crackling operation, scratchy controls separate to the background crackling and popping. So, you know, everything all at once, and the thing was unusable. As soon as I opened it, I saw some of the taller electrocaps, electrolytics, were leaning on an angle. They were, oh man, this thing's heavy. They were here and here, and they were leaning over like Tower of Pisa, and that is because they popped the bottom off. You can see that. So that bottom is affixed to the circuit board still. It's lost a leg there too. The leaking schmooze corroded the leg away to nothing. The leaking crap coming out the end of the cap has popped the plug essentially on the bottom, and the whole cap was sitting at an angle, so anyone who knows what they're doing would have seen that and straight away gone, whoa, something wrong here. So that was all through the power supply areas. There was some corrosion on some of the legs leaking onto the board. You can see there, that's actually, it looks like glue, but it's not. That's the crap coming out of the bottom of the cap. Some of the larger capacitors on some amps have a little dab of glue attached to the base, and that just stops the cap from vibrating during operation and possibly fracturing the leads. This is actually crap coming out of the bottom of the cap. So yeah, that was pretty obvious as soon as I took the cover off. Now, all sorts of stuff in this amp I noticed. So the previous tech did more damage than good. There were screws everywhere that were reamed over. There was some snapped off, that screw there. It's actually snapped off. So they cross-threaded them on reassembly and then just tried to tighten them harder. Like when you have resistance from a screw, never ever ever just cinch it up harder, because this happens. It snaps off every time. Trust me, I'm bald for a reason. And I've got to extract all of them. The screws that weren't snapped off, the heads of them were reamed out like they just used a drill, like a friggin', you know, impact driver to drive them in, and it's just brrr, and 2 clicks and your screw's dead, and you can't extract it without pliers on the head or something like that, or a screw extractor. So that's what he did do. Didn't clean the connectors. They're all corroded. what happens in hi-fis is you've often only got like the turntable and maybe the auxiliary plugged in these days, and that's it. Your TV and your turntable. All the rest just sit there and they corrode. You can see the ones that were plugged in, they're a bit brighter. They get a bit of dust on top. Dust absorbs moisture. That moisture corrodes the plating. The plating gets pitted. It spreads and gets worse. Often you can clean them up with like a bronze tip brush. In this case, not so much. However, they're only using the same sockets that they were using before anyway, so it's not the end of the world. I'll clean them up a bit, but the pitting on like the tape deck connectors that no one uses anymore, because honestly, who wasn't happy to see the death of cassettes? They suck. They always did suck. They sound like shit, they get tangled, they're shit. Anyway, so yeah, no one uses the tape inputs, really. So it's mainly auxiliary and phono. So as long as they're sweet, and they are, we'll be right. I'll show you a couple of other things that Tech did before I go on about the design of this, because it's a bit of an engineer's wet dream, like most of the amps from the era were. So the other thing that Tech did was changed a few caps out with jammy cons, which at the time was sold at J-Car. And whenever your tech is sourcing things from J-Car, that's a big red flag. It's like saying your mechanic sources all his stuff from Super Cheap Auto. No, he shouldn't be. He should be getting it from a wholesaler. How people buy things is a good indicator of how much awareness of the industry they have. So when they buy stuff from the consumer output that has TV ads every night, they're buying inferior products probably at retail rates. They should be having a trade account with an ABN, all of that kind of stuff, and a proper account with trade discounts, and then you can be competitive and using higher quality components than everyone else has access to, which is what I do and all the other techs do. It's not hard to get an account with these guys. You just need an ABN. And if you're a repair tech that is a hobbyist and you don't have an ABN, often they'll have cash accounts. You can just buy stuff over the counter for some of these places like Wes or Altronics, which is one step up from J-Car, but still, I'm talking Australia here. You guys in the States and the UK won't know what the hell I'm talking about. But yeah, it's a red flag when you see those components and those brands like Suntan and Jamicon inside an amp after it's been repaired. It's a red flag that whoever's been in there before doesn't have enough nous to use Google. So there's a couple of caps in here changed, oversized, wrong value, massively wrong value. 1 UF, 1 microfarad, sorry, from reading what I see. I'm on a video, so my IQ drops by like 3/4, as other YouTubers will know. So, a job sheet here somewhere. So we've got the main amp boards. I actually got a pretty good schematic for this and service manual. It's a bit annoying because back in the day they didn't have enough room on the schematics to show you the component designator as well as the value, so they'll have the component designators on here, and then often they'll have a table which shows you the values or whatever. Not so much a schematic. Here they do have both on this one, but it's pretty squeezy. So amp board, which I think I've blown up the image, not the amp board. We've got C 304 and 308. 304, 308. No, C301 and 302. So they should be 301, 302, 1 microfarad, 80 volt. That's what they were. He's put 1 microfarad, 250 volt, so they're too big. Clearly that's all he had in stock, so he just threw them in. So I went through, found a bunch of other values that were wrong, like massively, like by order of magnitude wrong. He's just used whatever he's had, and some of the voltage ratings were even lower. So I've got to check. Well, I'm just doing a full recap. Got all the leaky caps, any that he didn't change. It looks like he's only changed the ones that are easily accessible. So at the top, instead of actually figuring out how to open this thing in the correct order, he's just changed whatever he could reach and hope for the best. Sad Brad. So anyway, we're gonna do a full recap to that board. This design here is great. See how the board, it's kind of hard to see there. I'll show you from the side. See how the boards protrude beyond the heat sink? Well, they've put all the electrolytic capacitors in that little tongue that's protruding. You can see there, they're all shoved over on the side. That's brilliant. That's so you don't have to remove this whole assembly to do a recap. From the day this thing was built, they knew that those caps would have to be changed one day because they have a rated working life, right? And it's in the order of like 1,000 hours at 85 degrees Celsius. That's not a long time. You have this amp on every day, it's gone like that. It's like not even within its warranty. So the only reason they get decent life out of them is because they're not run at 85 degrees. It's run significantly below that. That's how they're designed. So there's a graph that shows the amount of hours to expect out of that capacitor given this much above or below the temperature rating. So if it's an 85 degree cap and it's running at 85 degrees, yes, expect 1,000 hours out of it. If it's rated at 1,000 hours, some are like 10,000, the more expensive ones. If it's rated at 1,000 hours at 85 and it's running at say 65, it might run 3,000 or 4,000 hours. It might double for every 10 degrees. It might halve for every 10 degrees above. So if you run it at 95 degrees, it might only last 500 hours. So they've got little graphs and they've got absolute minimum and maximum ratings as well. So if you run it here, don't expect it to last at all. So all of the electrolytics to a designer who knows what they're doing, they know that at some point they're going to have to be changed out. If you expect this device to live longer than those caps and maybe get serviced, you know, I know it's a crazy idea these days, but actually get serviced and maintained, you're going to design the thing so you can reach those components that need changing. This is all the stuff I'd do if I designed an amp. So I had to remove the face plate, which is a beautiful thing. I love these late 70s, early 80s amps. Yamaha do still do ones looking like this. I haven't seen inside one of them. It'd be very interesting to see how they carry out the internal construction when they look the same from the front. I dare say it'd be pretty similar to their surround sound receiver boards. Everything cheap, but you know, still worth 10 grand. But Yamaha are good. They've got good parts. At the low end of the consumer side, everyone's pretty much the same, but at the higher end stuff, they seem to put a bit more care in them, especially on this thing. This thing's nuts. So this is a full, it's not machined, it's pressed. You can see the little bit of distortion around the rectangular cutouts there from an actual punch going through. So it wasn't like, you know, milled or anything. And then they've brushed it, silk screened it. The silk screen's in great condition. Normally you see at least around like the power switch or the volume switch, whatever's used the most, they're wearing away or they've completely disappeared by this point. But this is like, it must have just been really well cared for. So it's a shame to see that they got swindled by some fuckwit at Glebe, because beautiful amp. Now the construction of the thing overall, it's got a metal skeleton and the top and bottom is removable. The top is wood. Oh, it's plywood with a veneer on it. I'll give you a look. That 70s street cred. It's got a molded plastic vent, and this is pretty cute. They've just used little strips of ply there, little 2.8 or 1/8 of an inch ply or whatever. metric, so 3mm. And this is literally fly screen. That steel fly screen, you can see it's starting to go a little bit rusty where it's got some humidity. That reminds me of like an old caravan park growing up. Next to the beach, it just, all the fly screen rusts, you know. So that was, that's pretty well made. Like, they got little reinforcement bits in the corner made out of European beech. That's my timber nerd coming out in me, because I do have a background in joinery. And marine ply. So, pretty cool. And they got a, looks like possibly a teak. Everything was teak in the 70s. Everything was teak. Looks like teak veneer on it. It's still in pretty good nick. It could do with a sand and refinish very gently, just to get a few little scuffs up there. But it's really good condition compared to most of them I've seen. So you got the world's biggest transformer for an amp this wattage rating, and two big ass caps here. Now I'm going to change them too. They're Nippon Chemicon. Particularly annoying changing large caps in vintage hi-fi stuff, because you can't get anything as big anymore. All the caps, as the technology improves, they get more and more compact, higher and higher capacity and voltage rating given the same size, closer lead spacing, no screw terminals, no fork terminals, just snap-ons. This is the ones I got for this amp. They're smaller diameter, so I'm going to modify the bracket and make them fit using some thick silicon, which I've done before. Silicon rubber, not silicon, squirty silicon. So that will make a little buffer between them. As you can see there, they're about 5mm. About 5mm smaller than the stock ones in radius, so say 10mm in diameter. So I'll do that later on. I'll do the grunt work first of just brutally replacing all these small electrodes. Move on to that. So that was literally the only one I could find in stock. I could have gone up in value to 22,000 microfarad, but like, there wasn't even anything at that. And then I was looking at like 400 volters, and then, you know, just the price went through the roof, and it's just stupidly overrated. So these are 18,000 microfarads and 63 volts and 105 degrees C rated, and they are from Cornell Dubilier. I'm not sure how to say that. It sounds French. I don't know. I should know that stuff, but again, there's a lot of stuff I should know that I don't. Alright, so I just flipped her over. Here we've got our power supply board. We've got fuse galore across there too. This is all the fuses for the main amplifier output. There's your mains fuse down there. These are all your low voltage supply fusing on the secondaries. This here is your low voltage supplies. That's a bipolar supply. Through here you can see the two regulators. This is a protection circuitry powered by those blue leads there. That senses lines and sends relay signals to other areas of the amp. There's another relay offering some. I think that's the speaker output relay. You've got a control board up the front with probably the world's rarest pots on them. I hope there's nothing wrong with them. Look at that bloody thing down there. How many gangs that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Jeez. Imagine having to replace that. You just couldn't. Where are you gonna get that? Nowhere. So I hope that's okay. You got a few little auxiliary boards just to mount switches off the original boards. It would have taken a long time to design this thing. You've got a punch steel skeleton holding it all together, and you can see they've punched the holes and they've perfectly lined them up with the fins in the heatsink. So the heatsink's still got airflow through the metal plate. There are a couple more little caps here on the bottom of the power amp boards, and again they're accessible from the side because they protrude past the assembly, and they've got a cutout there that was punched. Everything's so expensive on this thing. Just thinking about the tooling required to just make that one plate, it's so full on, so over engineered. There's a reason they don't make them like this anymore. But it sucks because it's beautiful. But you can see there's a couple of caps down here on the lean as well, and there actually is some glue on those ones, but it's still supple. It's not that crusty shit that was on the other board. And all those caps are coming out, so you can see the skin plastic wrap on them is pulled back because they were mounted close to the power transistors, which is, well, they even did it back then. Every manufacturer puts heat sensitive capacitors hugging transistors with no heat sinks. So I guess the tradition has been around for a while, not just planned obsolescence. But anyway, so all those caps are coming out. We're gonna lubricate all the switches, give them a clean, and basically go through the service procedure, check the bias on the thing, run some signal through it, take some measurements, check all the rails, all the usual stuff. And oh, that heatsink's loose. It's no good. And just go over the whole thing, visually check it, check all the solder joints, check there's no wires that are frayed or let go, and yeah, make sure she's hunky-dory. That's pretty time consuming, but good thing you only got to do it like once every 20 years, eh? Or, well, 40 years in this case. 77 I think they started making these, finished in like 81. So yeah, pretty cool. So I've unscrewed that power supply board, and it was designed so like all the connections leave on one side, so you can swing the board up like that. It's just a joy. Like, this is back when the guys who repaired stuff are the guys who design stuff. And look at that. You can access both sides, you can change anything you want, you can inspect the thing, you can fix solder connections that are cracked. You can see there's discoloration around those two regs where they've cooked the board a little bit. Looks like their solder joints aren't real crash hot either, so we might touch up and clean that area, see if it comes good. If not, we'll run some wires and we can replace all those caps with ease, comparative ease, compared to the new stuff where you've got to take every board apart and sit it separately on the bench, work on it, put it back together and hope like fuck that it works again, because otherwise you've got to do it all over again. So that is why we don't repair modern HiFi amplifiers, because they're all built like that. No removable bottom panels. You got to take everything out. You can't test it while it's apart. You can't even get your probes in there to take measurements. Everything's sandwiched, boards upon boards, and useless features like DSP that no one uses, and they go in the bin, unfortunately. What do? Don't buy them. So that's a good example of the way caps have changed over the years. Capacitors, both Nichicons, still got the same cute little logo. Both 330 mic, 63 volt. The one on the left is 85 degree rated, the one on the right is 105 degree rated. This one's a long life, that one's not. And look at the size difference. With different values it can be even more dramatic than that. And just every single cap has crap leaking out the bottom, and a deformed casing with corroded leads. You can see all the shit coming out of that one, and now it's stuck to the board. So with every cap I'm changing, I'm using a bit of alcohol, cleaning the board. The board doesn't look that dirty. Looks like almost negligible contamination, but and you look at a new cotton bud, like that's a few wipes and that's the shit that's come off it. That's the electrolyte leaking out of the capacitor. were not meant to last this long. Look at that. It's good, isn't it?